This martial arts timeline is designed to help describe the history of the martial arts in a linear fashion. Many of the articles for particular styles have discussions of their history. This article is designed to help visualize the development of these arts, to help better understand the progression of the separate styles and illustrate where they interrelate. The history of martial arts is challenging to document precisely, because of the lack of historical records, secretive nature of the teacher-student relationships and political circumstances during much of its history. It is likely that many techniques were learned, forgotten, and relearned during human history. Bronze Age. c. 20th century BCE. Murals in Tomb 15 at Beni Hassan, depicting wrestling techniques. c. 18th century BCE. The Babylonian Gilgamesh epic includes the major handheld weapons used prior to the gunpowder era. Iron Age and Antiquity. 8th century BCE, roughly the start of Greek Olympic competition. Through the popularity of the Olympics, martial arts like boxing, wrestling, and pankration flourished. 8th century BCE, Homer's Iliad describes many scenes of hand-to-hand combat in detail. 6th century BCE, 10 styles of astronavigia said to have been created around North India and combined in Takshashila, present-day Pakistan. c. 4th century BCE, Indian epic poetry and the Vedas give the earliest written mention of South Asian martial arts. Boxing, wrestling, swordsmanship, archery, and the use of numerous weapons are all described in detail. 264 BCE, first recorded gladiatorial combat staged in Rome during the funeral of Junius Brutus. 50 BCE, earliest records of a Korean martial art, namely Taekwondo, found in paintings in the Muyongchong, a royal tomb from the Goguryeo dynasty. CE 72, the Colosseum opens in Rome, providing the public with the world's largest martial arts venue for over the next 300 years. CE 1st century, Buddhist texts such as the Lotus Sutra mention a number of South Asian fighting arts, while the Khandaka discourages the practice. Vajramasti is also first attested to. CE 2nd century, p. Oxy 3466, a Greek papyrus manuscript on wrestling, is written. It is the earliest known European martial arts manual. CE 477, the first abbot of Shaolin Monastery was Buddhabhadra, an Indian jhana master who came to China in AD 464 to translate Buddhist texts to Chinese. The Shaolin Temple is built at the western base of the Chinese Songshan mountain range, at the orders of Emperor Shaolin. Successive Chinese emperors authorized fighting monks to train in the temple. Middle Ages. 550 Indian monk Bodhidharma teaches what will be called Chan Buddhism. While there is no evidence he was involved in the martial arts, folklore would link him to the creation of Qigong and Shaolin Fist, as well as crediting him with introducing forms into Silat. Chan and its Japanese offshoot Zen Buddhism will be influential among martial artists. C.700 Kuvilamala describes non-Kshatriya students learning martial arts from Hindu priests at Gurukula, or traditional educational institutions. 728 Date of the combat stele at the Shaolin Monastery. 782 Japanese Heian period begins. Curved swords called tachi appear, although samurai did not technically appear until the 12th century. In appearance these are the early curved swords commonly recognized as samurai swords. c. 800 to 900 Agni Purana, the earliest known manual of Dhanurveda, lists over 130 weapons, describes dozens of fighting stances, names techniques for various weapons, and provides a detailed discussion on archery. 1124 to 1138 Manasollasa, written by King Somaswara, gives the names of Indian wrestling techniques, training exercises and diet. 1156 to 1185 Japanese samurai class emerges during the warring period between the Taira and Minamoto families. The warrior code of Bushido also emerges during this time. 12th–13th century bas-reliefs in Angkor depict armed and unarmed combat. c. 1200 Malapurana, the oldest known text describing the techniques of Malayuddha. c. 1300 MSI 33, the oldest extant martial arts manual detailing armed combat. 1338 Japanese Ashikaga era, during which the samurai class expands its influence further. Many schools of swordsmanship flourish. The period ends around 1500. 1400 China sends delegations to Okinawa, which then begins trading extensively with China and Japan. The indigenous Okinawan unarmed combat art called Tiete is likely influenced by Chinese and Japanese arts over the next 3 centuries, forming the basis for modern karate. 1477 The Okinawan king Shoshin, influenced by the Japanese, bans the carrying of arms. Similar bans occurred in Japan in 1586. Both apparently led to the underground development of striking arts and may have encouraged unarmed combat. Techniques designed for use against armored soldiers, such as jujutsu. Early modern period, c. 1500 firearms become increasingly prevalent in Europe, diminishing the importance of traditional armed fighting systems. 1521 Spanish conquistadors arrive in the Philippines, recording that the native population fought them off with broadswords and bamboo spears. 1527 Mughals invade India, bringing Middle Eastern weaponry to South Asia and indirectly to the Malay archipelago. Indigenous Malayuddha is supplanted by the Persian-derived Pelwani. 16th–19th centuries, most of South and Southeast Asia gradually comes under European colonial rule. Martial practices are discouraged, in some places banned outright and preserved in secret. 1549 Hayashizaki Minamoto is born and later founds the art of Iajutsu or Iaido, the art of drawing and cutting with the sword in a single motion. Successive masters of his school can be traced to the present day. 1600 A newer style samurai sword, called the katana daito, is widely used. Afro-Brazilian slaves begin to develop the art of capoeira. 1641 Chinese rebels under Li Zichang sack the Shaolin Monastery for its support of the Ming government. While the monastery would be later rebuilt and patronized by the Qing government, it lost its fighting force and its place as a center of martial arts development. 1643 Legendary Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi is believed to have written the Book of Five Rings, a seminal work regarding the art and philosophy of the samurai and swordsmanship. 1674 Murata Empire founded by the warrior Shivaji, bringing his native art of Mardani Keel to prominence. 1699 Faced with growing intolerance from the Mughal rulers, Guru Gobind Singh militarizes the Sikh community in order to defend the faith and independence. Sikhs and Punjabis in general subsequently become renowned as a warrior community. 1700s Chinese temple frescoes depict Shaolin monks practicing unarmed combat. Okinawan Te and Chinese Shaolin boxing styles mix as part of trade between the countries. Wing Chun is also founded in Yunnan. 1743 Jack Broughton, an English bare-knuckle fighter, writes the first rules of boxing, later to become the London prize ring rules in 1838. 1750 Techniques of Taekwondo are written down. 1767 Burmese capture Ayutthaya and burn the kingdom's archives, including manuals on boxing and swordsmanship. 1790 Muye de Botongji is commissioned by King Zhengho of Korea and written by Yedeok Mus, Pak Jaga, and Bak Dongsu. It is one of the most comprehensive pre-modern military manuals of East Asia. 19th century, 1800 to 1900 Brazilian police periodically arrest anyone caught practicing capoeira. In 1862 alone, 404 people are arrested for capoeira. 1825 to 1900 Savate shifts from its street fighting roots to a modern sport. 1867 John Graham Chambers publishes a revised set of rules for boxing. They are publicly endorsed by John Douglas, 9th Marquis of Queensberry, leading the rules to become known as the Marquis of Queensberry Rules. 1882 Jigoro Kano modifies traditional Japanese jujutsu to develop the art of judo. He opens his school, Kodokan. One of his training methods, called randori, removed more dangerous striking techniques to emphasize grappling and submission locks between students practicing at full force. His students taught judo using randori around the world during the early 20th century. 1892 The first World Heavyweight Boxing Championship is fought under the Marquis of Queensberry rules of 1867, which are similar to those used today. Jim Corbett defeats John L. Sullivan. 1890s British introduction of Western boxing to India results in a decline of native Musti Yuddha until it survives only in Varanasi. 1893 to 1901 Edward William Barton Wright studies jujutsu in Japan and creates Bartitsu upon returning to England. One of the earliest introductions of Japanese martial arts in the West and the first known system to combine Asian and European fighting styles. 20th century, 1904 to 1906 Yamashita Yoshiaki gives judo lessons to President Theodore Roosevelt in 1904 and teaches judo at the U.S. Naval Academy in 1905 and 1906. 1908 Amateur boxing becomes an Olympic sport. 1920 to 1925 Mitsuyo Mida, a student of Jigoro Kano's, travels to Brazil to spread judo. In 1925 Carlos Gracie, a student of Mitsuyo Mida, opens his school, the first for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The art is further refined by the Gracie family thereafter, particularly by Carlos' brother Helio Gracie. 1928 Shaolin Temple records are burned, destroying many documents and records of earlier martial arts. 1920s-30s timed rounds, weight classes and standardized rules are introduced to Southeast Asian kickboxing under European influence. Modern gloves are made compulsory, replacing the hemp-rope bindings, resulting in less grievous injuries and fewer deaths, but also making many traditional techniques illegal. In Thailand, the newer ring style becomes known as Muay Thai while the older form is called Muay Boran. 1930s IM Lichtenfeld begins developing Krav Maga in Czechoslovakia. 1932 Mestre Bimba opens the first capoeira school, calling the style Luta Regional Baiana, because capoeira was still illegal in name. 1935 Karate becomes official name of the Okinawan martial arts, based on the traditional art of Te and the term Kara. 1936 Gichin Fanaka Kyoshi publishes the first edition of his book Karate do Kyohan, documenting much of the philosophy and traditional kata of modern karate. A second edition was published in 1973, many years after his death in 1957. 1938 Sambo, presented by Anatoly Kalampiev, Nguyen Locke, introduces Vovinam to the public. 1942 Morihei Ueshiba begins using the term Aikido to describe his art, which is related to Aikijujutsu. 1943 Judo, Karate, and various Chinese systems are officially introduced in Korea, likely beginning to mix with the indigenous Korean arts. 1945 First Korean Dojang, a martial arts school, opens in Seoul, Korea. Many other schools follow. Korean military personnel receive training in martial arts. 1945 Choi Yong-sul travels back to Korea after living in Japan with Sokaku Takeda. He begins teaching Dai-dong Yusul, later to become known as Hapkido. 1945 World War II ends, with many more American and British soldiers stationed in Asia exposed to the region's fighting systems. This includes the American Robert Trias, who began teaching Asian-based martial arts in Phoenix, AZ. 1949-1950 Yip Man leaves Foshan and moves to Hong Kong to escape the communist government and begins teaching Wing Chun to his first Hong Kong student Lang Shuang. 1955 On April 11, General Choi calls a meeting between Korean masters to unify the Korean martial arts. 1957 9 Korean training halls unite under the name Taekwondo. 1959 Bruce Lee arrives in America and begins to teach Wing Chun to his first student, African-American Jesse Glover, the first documented instance of a Westerner learning Chinese martial arts. 1964 Kyokushin-Aiken, a style of stand-up full-contact karate, founded by Masaru Oyama. 1964 Judo becomes an official Olympic sport. 1966 International Taekwondo Federation is formed. 1969 Greek-American Jim Arvanitis introduces a modern reconstruction of pankration. 1973 The Bruce Lee film Enter the Dragon brings Chinese martial arts to the United States domestic audience. He dies that same year. 1973 World Taekwondo Federation is formed. 1975 Bruce Lee's book Tower of Jeet Kune Do is published post-mortem. He credits the influence of Western boxing and fencing in developing his art, among others. 1985 Satoru Sayama forms Shooto, a shoot wrestling organization. It would go on to become the first mixed martial arts organization in the world. Ukrainian martial art based on Cossack combat traditions Combat Hopak is formed. 1988 WTF-style Taekwondo becomes an Olympic demonstration sport, later becoming a full medal sport in 2000. 1993 The first Ultimate Fighting Championship is held. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner Royce Gracie wins the event. 21st century, 2001 The Marine Corps Martial Arts Program is formalized. 2009 Modern Arnis declared as national sport of the Philippines.